All right, Psalm 40. Let's call this one Waiting Off Leash. In this psalm where David is going to remind us that life's problems rarely resolve themselves all at once, but there are times when we can simply appreciate the progress that we have made, realized, or been given. In this psalm where David is no longer talking about waiting, he's actually going to start out by talking about the ways in which he waited, because God has now given him at least partial relief to his suffering. In verse 1, where it says, I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined to me and heard my cry. He drew me up out from the pit of destruction, out of the miry bog, as he is going to go on to celebrate the ways in which God has delivered him. Reminiscent of Psalm 30, he is going to say there are times when God, moving past simply forgiving us, but restoring our glory, can put us in a position where our condition or our restoration can speak for itself. And so David is going to notice in verse 3, he put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise to our God. Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord, helping us to once again see the way in which an impressive before and after picture can speak for itself. But not content with simply letting the before and after speak for itself, David is going to go on to talk about the ways in which he is going to openly praise or give credit where credit is due, thanking God for being the one who has restored him out of a situation that once again might have otherwise seemed hopeless, understanding that sacrifice was one of the ways that the people of Israel could say thanks to God. David is going to say something that suggests that, of course, it might not be the highest thanks, because he is going to go on to thank God for giving him an open ear. And not only giving him an open ear, but he's going to celebrate the fact that he delights to do the things that God is calling him to do. Understanding that in most of these Psalms, or in a lot of the Psalms that we've already gone through, David is going to talk about the way in which our genuine gratitude is shown in the way that we respond to second chances. And so Psalm 40 may build on that in this way, understanding that for whatever reason, it reminded me of the dog whisperer. Once again, Cesar Millan, the man who became famous for being able to essentially walk a whole pack of dogs off leash without any problem. It pointed me back to what David cautioned us of in Psalm 32, where he said, don't be like the horse or mule, or he recorded what God might have actually been saying to us and saying, don't be like the horse or mule, where if they're not on bit or bridle, or in the case of dogs, a leash, they're not going to stay near you. And so he is going to talk about not only his delight, but quite possibly his delight now being in showing God that you don't have to worry about me straying and causing all kinds of drama, or the kinds of things that got me into this situation in the first place, by being miserable to walk with off leash. Understanding that in battle, David was probably more akin to a lion than a dog, reminding me even more of C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And of the scenes from the movie, at least, that stand out in my mind was a scene when the children were introduced to Aslan, the lion that was supposed to be a picture of Christ himself. When one of the children asks, that lion being off leash, is he safe? To which whoever was narrating the scene or responding to the child said, no, he's not safe, but he's good. And so understanding that being the picture that C.S. Lewis offered of Christ, and then David, not only in this psalm, but just in general, being described as a man after God's own heart, seems to want to move past a time when he wasn't really safe off leash, understanding that he wasn't safe for Uriah and Bathsheba at every point in his life. But God willing, putting all of that in his rearview mirror, he seems to want to make part of his thanks telling God that he now wants to be, if not completely safe, good off leash, understanding that he is going to conclude this psalm by asking roughly three things. Understanding that, like we said, he's seeing progress, not a complete resolution of all his problems. He's once again going to ask God to help him overcome his iniquities in showing mercy. But in his mercy, he's also going to ask God to shame those who want to see him hurt simply for the sake of seeing him hurt, not necessarily as any consequence for the things that he has done wrong. But he's going to go on to ask God for those who genuinely seek him. He's going to ask that they be able to rejoice in God, as he is, at the end of the psalm, going to refer to himself as a poor and needy man who once again is praying to God for mercy, understanding that insofar as God has given him an open ear. And to the degree he has a delight to do the will of the Lord. David seems to be moving past whatever drama or damage he's caused in the past by wanting to be good off leash, understanding as C.S. Lewis drew the distinction between being safe and good, David was never supposed to be safe for everybody. But to the degree that he was around the people of God, people who were genuinely seeking safety in God, he wanted to get to a point where Uriah, Bathsheba, and everybody else genuinely seeking God could not just be safe around David, but God willing, ideally, feel protected by David. A transformation possible as God led, as David described himself, this poor man along paths of righteousness.